No, you wouldn't. That's right, man. That's pretty cool. I appreciate you showing it to me, seriously. I'm trying to think not how to use it for bad, but how to use it for good. So,
I'm saying it goes both ways.
yeah, it could. It could. We're going to go ahead and get started this morning. Thank you for being here, and I appreciate those who may be tuning in online or will be joining us online in the coming days as they watch this after the fact. I also want to thank you for the conversation last night. You know, anytime we begin these seminars, I never know really what you have in mind when it comes to your expectations, but what I do know in speaking as I have, that everybody kind of came for a reason. You came to hear something, or you came because maybe you're in the midst of raising children or impacting grandchildren, and you want to just make sure maybe that you're as informed as possible. And then there are others, quite honestly, it doesn't matter what was going to be said, because the church was having something, you were going to be here. And then this morning, there were those of you who showed up because there were donuts. Either way, I am not judging why you're here. I'm just merely saying thank you for being here. And it's been an honor to be with you. I appreciate the interest last night in the booths back there. And I brought one of the books up just to show you. We are in the midst, where am I at? I'm in Michigan. As Kurt said yesterday, this is the third speaking engagement in a row, which is not unheard of for us. But before that, I was home for one day, and I had spent 10 days out in Oklahoma. And then before that, I was home for a few days, and I couldn't tell you where I was. I'd have to look back at my schedule. But we stay on the road a lot. However, all that to say this last week in Missouri, Kansas City area, the brethren out there were very kind to support Kyo Publications. Kyo is a nonprofit in the sense of this. We are a nonprofit in the state of Tennessee, but not a 501c3. We used to be. One of my elders who helps me oversee the books and helps me with the books, he had advised that we didn't do that because we weren't using the company to that end. But all that to say this, when I say it's a true nonprofit, what I mean is we have a very small staff, and we pay the staff pathetically. You're looking at the staff, okay? And we pay ourselves pathetically, and we're blessed to be able to do that because people look at our family, and we're blessed to partner with congregations across America as domestic missionaries. And so as a nonprofit concept, any of the proceeds that come back into that company, it gets poured back into creating more resources. We pay our expenses out of that as far as what it takes to publish and what it takes to keep the business going. We pay our authors, obviously. But otherwise, I want you to feel good about that. If you decided on something, or you're looking at that going, I think that would be a blessing in my family, or, you know, to us as a couple or as a parents, be assured of what's going on there. That's not just a preacher who's out there setting up books because he's padding his pocket, okay? I want you to know that. But I did bring this particular book up because this seminar is based upon the material that you'll find in this book. So if there's somebody who maybe you're not taking notes, you like to just listen, and then you're like, well, I'll get the book and read it later. There's more in the book than it's what's being delivered in the seminar. That's just the nature of writing versus the delivery of information. However, it's also one of those things that makes it real easy to pass that along to somebody that you think could be blessed by this. And so I would simply throw that book out there for your consideration. But there's others. The brethren in Missouri were hungry for material. And so if you're interested in what Kyo offers fully, I invite you to go to our website, kyopublications.org. Or you can find all of our resources online at Amazon, Books A Million, Barnes & Noble, even Target.com, Walmart.com, things like that. We're out there. So feel free to look that up if you'd like. The other table I want to make sure that you do see as well, I have the privilege of recruiting for the Bible department at Freed-Hardeman University. And they came to me about 5 years ago, and they said, you're on the road a lot, talking to a lot of people. Why don't you take Freed-Hardeman with you? And, after talking about that, I thought that what they asked me to do fit the mission that we have. And so my job, as I go around, I tell people about, quite honestly, I believe the greatest school that we have affiliated with the Lord's church. I don't make apologies for that. Freed-Hardeman has been around for a long time, over 150 years. And you think over 150 years, surely you've discovered who you are. We have. And here's the deal. We don't apologize for who we are. You're going to find Freed-Hardeman stands on the truth of God's Word. Every semester, every kid gets to take a Bible class. And in that, they're going to be taught by professors who are not just merely studied at some of the biggest universities. Hebrew Union is where the dean of our college, Dr. Justin Rogers, got his doctorate from. There are very few people in the Lord's church who get to go to Hebrew Union, much less finish. And we've got very high quality, high studied professors, but we also have men who are in the trenches. They're preaching. Many of them are in congregations at the local level, still putting into practice not just the studied work, but the people relational side of things. And so when I think about a school, a university who's bought into a purpose, Freed-Hardeman University is settled and in a loving manner that is a family. And what I love about Freed-Hardeman is over 80% of our student body population are affiliated with the Lord's church. You will not find that number in any other school that's affiliated with the Lord's church. Part of that, I can give you some reasons, but no reason to go into those reasons, but athletics opened the door a lot to these other schools, and it changed things. But on top of all of that, just think about if you're going to send your child somewhere to get an education, you have options. They can go to a state school, they can go to community college, or they can go to a private Christian university. Now, they don't have to. They can go to the military. They can go into the workforce. I'm not suggesting there's any one fit for anybody, right? I can tell you this, for me, is that I have a degree from a secular school. I have a certificate of completion from a school of preaching, and I have a master's degree from private Christian university, Freed-Hardeman University. Now, all that to say this, when I went to Middle Tennessee State University, majored in science, those professors didn't care how my walk with the Lord was. I was a number. I filled out a Scantron. Their job was to teach. They didn't care if I learned. My job was to learn. I don't remember a single professor offering to pray with me, offering to have me into their home to have a meal. And I don't say that. I just simply say at state universities, you should expect something. And what you don't expect is the spiritual emphasis. As if anything, there were always rallies or events in the commons that were anything but positive spiritually. At the School of Preaching, I had the privilege, that's where Erin and I met, Nashville School of Preaching. She was going through the ladies' portion. It was Nashville School of Preaching and Biblical Studies. In case you're wondering, was she studying to be a preacher? No, she was not. But they had a ladies' side of that. That's where we met and had the opportunity to, that was my first formalized training. But when I went to Freed-Hardeman to get my master's, before distant learning was like it is today, we had to drive in, take classes in person, and then drive home. You know, I tell people I was driving 5 hours a day and taking 6 hours worth of classes. But I loved it. By some of the men who became very good friends that were my professors. And there was a big difference in that environment. Big difference in the spiritual emphasis, big difference in professors having a small student-teacher ratio that wanted to know how you were doing with the Lord, wanted to encourage you because there was a bigger purpose than just your nuts and bolts of your education. I would just simply encourage you this way. Your kids and grandchildren are going to be influenced by the direction that you give them. You can direct them into a path that will purely be about education, and if that's what you do, then obviously you do that. I believe you've prayed about that. You have sought after what you believe spiritually is best for your child. But I want to encourage you this way. I want to encourage you to think about a private Christian university when it comes to that. Because here's the deal. Your children between the ages of 18 and 21, that's the first time oftentimes they're stepping out of your home, and their faith is going to become theirs. They're not going to attend services because they're in your house anymore. And you want to have people who walk alongside you to encourage them just as you tried to encourage them, and you did so for 18 years. So I'll throw that out there. There's some information regarding Freed-Hardeman, regarding social clubs, regarding various education opportunities. We're about to breach into and branch into more STEM focus, AI focus, computer science focus. That's a big deal. There's an entire building that's being renovated to suit that program's in. Nursing program is phenomenal. Education program is phenomenal. The business college is phenomenal. So we've got a lot of good. On top of that, the big joke, and Kurt brought this up, we have now a Chick-fil-A. And so, if there's any selling point that's been promised over the years, Chick-fil-A's it. But it seems like if you go visit, it's probably going to be closed. But don't hold that against us. It'll be open when you leave, okay? We'll open it back up. No, they're obviously, anytime you open up something new, they're working out the kinks. So, but it's up and going. It's really neat. But I would love to talk with you about either one of those tables if you so choose to. Let's go to our Father in prayer. And then we're going to jump right into this particular lesson entitled Safety Must Be Prioritized. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, thank you for the morning. Thank you for the fellowship that we've been able to enjoy. And thank you for the opportunity we have to pause as parents and grandparents, as church leaders, to consider how best to navigate these waters and help our children navigate these waters. Lord, we love you and we just want to be pleasing to you, for we recognize that our time on this earth is short. We know that we're only here maybe 80 years, maybe 90 years, if we even get that. And so, Lord, in the grand scheme of things, that's very short. And so we pray to you that you'll use our lives to bring a big impact for you, to your glory, and specifically within our homes, for we know that's our biggest mission field that we have. And so, Lord, I pray your blessing would be upon the parents and grandparents and church leaders who are here. Please open our eyes. Thank you for those who are attending who do not have children yet, Lord, but they have a desire to learn and to grow and to just enjoy fellowship with those who are trying to be who you would have us to be. Lord, please bless me as the speaker. Help me to stay out of your way this morning. And it's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. You know, when you think about concepts regarding safety, I want to not try to scare you, but I do want you to know this lesson is intended to open your eyes. And it may not. Maybe some of you walk away and you say, Joe, that didn't open my eyes at all. I already knew about some of the dangers that were out there and why safety is important. Well, maybe we do, but maybe at times we relax. You heard me mention yesterday, I think it was, in one of my prayers, and I didn't do this as an illustration. I genuinely, when I pray to God, I've taught her, you know, we just talk to God. That's what we do. He wants us just to talk to Him. I don't try to paint a pretty picture, but when it comes to family, here's the understanding that I have. Sometimes we get wearied as parents and grandparents. Wearied in the sense of this: can you imagine having to always be on? You never get a breath. You never get a chance to be off. You're always on. Sometimes when I travel and speak, it's kind of that way. When as a speaker, it's like, okay, can I just be Joe? Well, I've settled into just being Joe. But some speakers struggle with that. They're like, well, when I step into the building, I am the preacher. And when I step out of the building and I'm not around anybody, then I am just Joe. Well, here's me. I'm just Joe. That's why sometimes it works for people and sometimes it doesn't. But oftentimes when you stay with people, and it's not that way with Kurt and Shannon, they've made us so comfortable. But sometimes you feel like you're always the preacher and not just Joe, right? And so that's one of the things I've loved about our conversations. But can you imagine always just being on? You're never off. Sometimes parents feel that way when it comes to protecting our children, when it comes to parenting, when it comes to doing what's right. And you should feel that way because, quite honestly, you don't get to take a break. Can you imagine today you're waking up? You've seen some of those shirts, right? I'm not going to adult today or something like that, right? I'm checking out of this concept of adulting. Well, that sounds pretty. And maybe what that means is this: I'm not going to do the chores. I'm not going to prepare your meals. I'm not going to wash your clothes. I'm not going to adult today. So therefore, you get to try to do it on your own. Ha, 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 right? Mom on strike, dad on strike, whatever, right? And sometimes we do that because we need a down day. But spiritually speaking, I want you to kind of personalize this, that you don't get to do that. And the reason you don't get to do that is because Satan doesn't do that. If I can use a boxing illustration, I want you to think about you're fighting against Satan and what he wants to do in your home. And you are wearied, right? Round 1 went great. Round 2 went great. You feel like at least maybe that you're on your game. You're not worried about the scorecard, but you're taking the fight to Satan. Eventually down the line, there's going to be a sense where your arms get tired, where the bell dings and you are wearied to answer the bell. And maybe even in the middle of the round, you've seen boxers perhaps, how when they get tired, their hands go down, and their corner men are always telling them, get your hands up, right? But the weariedness brings them down. Sometimes it feels that way when it comes to prioritizing safety and when it comes to technology. But you have to be aware and you have to be alert, and here's why: because Satan always answers the bell. He always holds his gloves up, and as a matter of fact, all he's doing is he's really waiting on you, because good parents oftentimes, look, I know where you are. It's a Saturday morning. You're at this seminar. You're already expressing an interest in these things, and so for that, I want to commend you. But the reality is, Satan's just saying even good parents at times will relax. Even good parents and grandparents at times will lower their gloves And when you lower your glove, what do you think a good boxer is going to do? He's going to pop you. And if he pops you, if he gets enough into you, guess what? He's going to cause some damage, and not just in your life, but in the lives of your kids. I don't know if you've ever sat across the table with parents or grandparents who wonder why it is their children are addicted to pornography, or why they got wrapped up in certain aspects of the technological spiral. And you look at them and you say, I know you were intentional, right? Well, we were, but we just got tired. We quit paying as close attention. That's usually the way it's said. We quit paying as close of attention. And guess what? The Bible describes Satan in 1 Peter chapter 5 as a roaring what? Somebody tell me. Lion. Have you ever watched a video of a lion hunting, or a house cat hunting a bird or a rabbit? You know what I have noticed is that lion doesn't, when it's stalking, it doesn't walk around going, roar, roar. You know why it doesn't do that? Because if it did that, what would the prey do? Run. Instead, what a lion will do is, right before it pounces, it roars. Now, why would you think a lion, right before it pounces, it roars? Well, here's what they've discovered. That lion knows that there's nothing like a roar of a lion. And when it roars, you're going to, and a prey, an animal, will stop and just for a moment be startled. And what the lion knows is that's all it takes. If you're startled, if you freeze, if you look, you're dead. Isn't it interesting? The Bible describes that Satan is like a roaring lion, not just a lion. It's because he's ready to pounce. And not only that, he's ready to do whatever it takes to throw you off. And that's why I want you to understand that he's not aloof to what's going on in our culture today. Satan's not this idea that he operated when there were dirt roads and sandals and togas, and therefore he doesn't know what's going on in our world today. He absolutely knows what's going on in our world today, and Ephesians 6 talks about a spiritual battle and the necessity to be armed spiritually for what's at stake, because there are fiery, and some translations say fiery arrows, some say fiery darts. I like to put it this way: there are nuclear missiles that he's waiting to drop on your home. And if you let your guard down, then the reality is you're not just relaxing for the sake of relaxing, you're opening your entire family up for potential dangers. This morning, what I want us to do is I want us to look at three main areas when it comes to this subject of why safety must be prioritized. And the first one that I want you to consider is this idea of child predators. Now, there was a study, I say a study, it's not, it's a legal case that you can go in and read. Sometimes in my research, I will get into the weeds of reading legal decisions. And it's not because I'm a lawyer or I love law. Quite honestly, I love history. I love finding out why people tick the way that they tick. I like kind of getting to the core of, why you're responding the way that you are. What is your approach? But when it comes to reading legal arguments, I want to find out the process that was laid out before the jury or the judge. And in that, you're going to find details. Well, in one of those details, I came across this particular conversation of a young lady who was duped into believing that she was interacting with another teenage girl. And in interacting with a teenage girl over social media, I believe it was, or over text rather, somebody that she didn't know other than just online, she apparently had shared some pictures. Now, you would think, well, why would two teenage girls, young teenage girls, be sharing anything like that? Well, I don't know, but what I do know is this: there are times when I go shop for a shirt or I shop for pants or whatever that I want another person's opinion. And so it's not a rarity. My style has never been something that I was really good at. I was more grafted to know how to, do my hair than I was to dress well. So I will send a picture to Erin from time to time. I'll take a picture of myself in the mirror with a shirt on at a department store and say, "What do you think?" And then she'll either say, "Ooh, I cannot even believe, that you wanted to send that to me." Or she'll be, "Hey, it looks great, but what about if they had it in this tone?" Or something like that, right? So I want you to imagine two teenage girls that are sharing images, at least they think they're two teenage girls, sharing images, and maybe it's images of undergarments, maybe it's images of certain bathing suits, maybe it's something else. I don't know. But whatever it was, in this case, there were images shared, and what you see on the screen are the actual messages that were sent when finally it was revealed that she didn't know the person on the other end that she thought she knew. It says this, "You've been tricked. I'm a guy, and I will email all the pics you sent to your school, and I would not block me or delete. Because if you do that, I'm still sending it to your school. If you obey me and do everything I want, then I will delete your pics and will not email your school. But I warn you, if you disobey me once, I will send your pics." To which then she was scared. Now, you would think at this point in time she would run to her parents, right? That's what you hope your children would do. That's what I hope my children would do. But kids don't do these things. Sometimes when they get down into the trenches of being in an area that they know they should not have gotten into, or that maybe they got themselves in trouble, there's fear. Especially if it has not been a safe part of our culture within our home to talk openly about everything, right? There are times that when I talk with parents and about children and what they might say or what they might do, at times I will offer to them, I say, well, the first thing that you do is don't overreact. The first thing that you do is pick your jaw up off the ground, right? Because here's why. If you show your child that they are not safe to come to you and tell you whatever because there was a volcanic eruption in your reaction or a total shock where your jaw hit the ground, guess what they will learn over time not ever to do? Come talk to you. You know why? Because they don't want a volcanic eruption. So it does matter how we respond. Now, do you have a right to respond the way? Would her parents have responded in a way such as perhaps, why would you ever do that? Maybe. I don't know what was going on in their life. All I know is this. You see the rest of that. What do I have to do? She was so afraid that the pictures would be shared all over school campus. He said, you're going to have to send me nudes. Now, eventually the parents got involved, and they obviously were hurt. They wanted to protect their daughter. Thus, there was a legal case that came out. But my question is, why didn't they know in the first place? Now, you look at that and you say, well, Joe, not any parent can know everything. And you're right. You're absolutely right. If you think for 1 minute that you'll always be able to know everything that happens, then you're probably setting yourself up for disappointment. But here's what I do know. What they didn't obviously check her phone on a regular basis, or if they did, she had a different account of some sort where this was in hiding, and they were not informed, but that's beside the point. We can talk all day long about the whys. Here's what I want us to focus on. There was a young lady who was preyed upon, and a predator had his way with her over technology. Now, I'm not going to guess that nobody sets out and says, hey, you know what? I think that could happen to my child. Most people probably say that would never happen to my child. Well, here's the reality. It's happening to more kids than we realize. The statistics, and of course, you see the date that is there. I would love to tell you that every year the statistics are updated, but studying culture and statistics sometimes can be like picking up a handful of water in a stream that's flowing by. By the time you study what's in your hand, you're like, ha-ha, I get culture. Where you picked it up from is already gone, right? And so you just have to try to stay up on the new studies, and sometimes studies are coming out, sometimes they're not. But either way, the idea is this. The studies are not showing an improved trend when it comes to the amount of child predators and the amount of young people who have been preyed upon. So what you see here, it's estimated that at any given time, there are 500,000 internet predators actively pursuing children through multiple online profiles. Online predator stats reveal that 20% of kids have been sexually solicited. That's 1 out of every 5. 75% of them didn't tell a parent about it. As much as 90% of parents will never know of such inappropriate conduct. I want that kind of just to settle in for you for just a second. Even good parents who are trying to be proactive, you're not going to know everything. Which is why you've got to prioritize filtering out and putting in safety steps and a culture when it comes to technology as much as possible. 14% of kids have met online predators in person, and nearly 75% of them did so more than once. You ever seen those ABC commercial or ABC specials or CBS specials where they've got cameras set up and there was a supposed child that was going to meet a child predator in a location, and the child was there and was probably somebody in their 20s but looked much younger, and when the predator shows up, then she goes off into the back room and out comes the host of the show. Have you ever seen those? I've seen those, and it's terrifying. when you think about not just sharing pictures. Some people would say, well, sharing pictures, Joe, I mean, come on, kids do crazy things. We did crazy things. We just didn't have the internet and technology to document it, and then we are so grateful we did not have the documentation over technology. But the idea is when you go to meeting in person, that's a totally different level of intent, which is why then there's an arrest that is made. How many of you in your local paper or your internet, if you get on the city, the city sites or the local news, you'll see there was a sting and where child predators were arrested. And some of those individuals perhaps are school teachers. Some of them are religious leaders. Some of them may even work for the city. Some of them could be policemen or veterans in the military themselves. And you look at that and you're going, these people are supposed to protect. I can't tell you, it's almost been, not every day, but multiple times over the last month where I'll get local news channels that'll pop up from various places that I'm at, depending on where I'm speaking. And you'll say, so-and-so has been arrested. A teacher at such and such school system has been arrested for sexual encounters with a minor on multiple occasions. And it's like, this seems to be, as we look at this, it's like, is this really that rampant? And what I need you to hear is 1 out of every 5 is not a small number. We might say, well, then that's 4 out of 5 who it's never happened to. Yeah, but is 1 out of 5 too many? I think so. I mean, I don't know how many we'd be okay with. 1 out of 10, would we look back and go, well, okay, we're doing pretty good? I would say, no, that one is worth that being an issue over. Well, okay, then, if we're going to value all those children and all their innocence, right? Because ultimately that's what the predators prey upon. They prey upon the innocence of a child, and they're grooming that child. That's what they're doing. It never starts off with, hey, I'm a predator and I want to abuse you. It always starts off with somebody who's going to create a relationship. There's a friendship. There's a common ground. Oftentimes it's over interest. It could be over video games. I thought this was quite interesting. In the book, I go into it a little bit. Minecraft has actually been used by child predators. Any gaming site, any game that has a chat component has actually been tapped into by child predators. And they do that because oftentimes if the parents don't know or the parents don't know how to turn off the chat component, or else they just don't see a problem with the chat component, then the predators say, that's disengaged parenting and grandparenting. The child's in this world on their own. I will portray myself. I'm a 45-year-old man, but I'll portray myself as a 13-year-old girl, and I will befriend some of these kids, and I will groom these kids, and eventually we'll start a conversation that will head down a certain pathway, maybe share pictures, and all of a sudden, once I have enough, then I can spring it on them who I really am, and if they don't want me to share this with all the world, then they're going to send me more stuff. And that's exactly what predators do. As a matter of fact, over and over again, you can see that online solicitation is the number one place that predators prey on our children, and online is where they mainly will abuse them. And you say, what do you mean? Because not everything leads to face-to-face meetups. And that if we're only gauging it on, well, I don't want them to meet up with a child predator. Yeah, but what do you want that child predator to extort from your child or your grandchild in the meantime? And in the process of all that, I want you to think about what your child is experiencing and what they're feeling, the instability, the fear of constantly knowing, hey, at any moment in time, this could get out. And of course, what's going to happen is they're going to want to do what they do to keep it quiet unless you've created an atmosphere where they can come to you and admit wrong. They know there's going to be discipline, but they also know they're going to find love. I'll show you these things. 18.8% unwanted sexual questions are the most common component of online sexual abuse against children. Conversations that turn sexual. And it's not that teenage girl wanted the conversation to turn sexual or the teenage boy wanted the conversation to turn sexual. But what you'll see there is that is the majority of that. Online predators' goals, what do they really want? They want explicit content. So their goal is, they have a goal in mind. They want pictures. They want conversation. Because at the end of the day, those child predators, they don't care about your child. Your child is a means to an end. They are a disposable piece of trash to an individual who is so absorbed in their sexual addictions that they prey on children to fulfill those. And as you think about your child, you're sitting there going, but Joe, my child's not a piece of trash. I know your child's not a piece of trash. They're not a piece of trash to you, but there are people in this world who will use them to their ends, and it doesn't matter who they are. They could take your child out of the equation, plug another child in there, because it's never been about a connection with your child for the sake of a connection. It's always been about a means to an end. Over and over again, we see those who have mainly had this happen to them are female. There's no doubt about that. But I thought it was quite interesting that 1 out of every 3 are males. I think that's quite interesting. You see there the other aspect that's put out. I don't make these up, just so you know. So the chart includes also transgender or gender fluid individuals. Please don't take that as me affirming any of that. That's another discussion for another time. But either way, here's what I know. People in that category are still people with real feelings and real emotions, and they don't deserve for this to happen to them either. Does that make sense? Right? None of this is okay. Now, all of that to simply say this: you and I must be aware that child predators are a real thing. Not everybody who says that they are a teenager on the internet is a teenager. There was a song not long ago, I think it was by the great theologian Brad Paisley, that he made a comment, you can be anything on the internet, right? And his whole song was about, I crafted this image. And you and I both know that with AI coming along and pictures being distorted, that they really can be anything. And it's pretty scary, because the question is, am I really getting who I think I'm getting? And if you've ever talked to individuals, and I don't know if anybody here met their spouse, like on churchofchristSingles.com or anything along those lines. I've known numerous people who have, and they have successful marriages, so please understand that. But I can tell you this, there's a concern that they have of, is this person who they really say they are? And I was in Oklahoma not long ago, and we had a great conversation with a young lady who's met 3 really good, godly men on one of those sites. And the idea, though, is she would tell you that you never know what you're going to get. Because you can craft an online profile to be what you want it to be. You can put a picture up on there and, maybe make yourself look a certain way because you're trying to have an initial attraction from somebody else, and therefore it's distorted. Well, if we know that can happen with things like dating sites, online dating sites that like Christian Mingle or churchofchristSingles.com, then it can happen with people who are trying to prime and go after your kids too, right? The second area that I want you to think about is this one right here. When you think about concepts regarding your children, and it really flows from the first one, safety must be prioritized, not only in awareness about child predators and the prominence of that is on specifically through gaming sites. I need you to hear that, because sometimes we think games are not significant. I would encourage you, if your child plays video games, even Minecraft, turn the chat off. If you don't know how to do that, if your child knows how to turn it back on, and you from time to time checking their device, you find the chat is back on, then I would have concerns about that, right? So you need to know who they're chatting to. I would offer to you, those who they chat with need to be approved by you. And all of that is solely because your job is to protect them, even when they're innocently playing games like Minecraft, right? The second one, though, is not what a child predator does, although child predators want to harvest information. But I want you and I to think about our role in this. This is obviously just supposed to be a social media site. It's a stock image of a social media site. But I think it would be interesting for somebody to build me out, and maybe AI can do this. I don't know. That would be kind of cool. AI, build me a social media site, a social media profile for a mother who has 3 children, and go on and list some parameters of that, right? And then us just spend time in this portion of the seminar looking at that profile, because here's my question. I wonder how much about your children I can learn without you ever telling me anything and me just going to your social media profile. I wonder if I could learn your children's names. I bet I could. Right now, if I just went to your profile, I bet I could learn your children's names. You probably have celebrated birthdays, and you probably have put those birthday pictures up, and every time you put a picture up, there's a timestamp that goes with it. And so I could get within a reasonable distance of time of an actual birthday, even if you didn't have the balloon in the background that had their age on it, that I could know the age of your child. I'm pretty smart. I can cross-reference that age with a grade. And chances are, if your children are in band, they're in choir, They play youth sports. I can probably find pictures of that, of you out there with friends after the game, maybe getting ice cream, or perhaps after a band concert, or maybe you took pictures of your kids at a band concert, and I can find out where your children go to school. I know their age, so I can basically get what grade they're in. I can go to the school website and get the school calendar. I can find out when they get to school, when they're out of school. I might even be able to pull, if I'm smart enough, what teachers they have and what their school calendar is. And I want you to think about all of this. Your children never approved you to put anything of that out there. They didn't ask, hey, Mom and Dad, would you please advertise to everybody that I'm, in this grade and I'm this age and that I play on this sport? And you say, well, what's the big deal? It's mine. It's mine. Yeah, but here's why it's a big deal. If you don't have your social media site set to private, then I can go on right now and I can just search. And you could too. And I'm just curious what else we could find. One of the things with us, and of course, I know, people know this, but if you're gone all the time, I know this occurs. Somebody posts on their website or their Facebook site or their Instagram, hey, we're in, Granville, Michigan this week. Next week, we're going to be in Kansas City, Missouri. The week after that, we're going to be in Oklahoma City. I hope you all, if you're in the area, please come and find us. Now, we have advertised to other people, hey, come to our seminars. But guess what we've also advertised? No one's home who wants to break in. Now, you think about that, and you're like, you mean there are really people out there who might think that way? Thank you. I was waiting on you to speak up, Grant. I guarantee you there are people who are out there who think that way. And what's sad is that they think that way about our kids, too. Now, am I saying then, Joe, are we not supposed to ever post anything about our children? Are we never supposed to anything about our grandchildren? I mean, after all, social media, we want other people to see what we're doing. Well, I've got all kinds of thoughts regarding social media, okay? Number one is this. If you live in the same home as your spouse and it is their birthday, why can you not just go tell them happy birthday? Why do you need to say happy birthday on social media? Now, I know why we do it, and I've done that occasionally. I have not said happy birthday to Aaron on social media. I will say, please join me in wishing Aaron a happy birthday. Because that's ultimately what we want, right? We want other people to now say happy birthday. There's nothing wrong with that, but I just found it quite interesting when I get on there and I'm like, happy birthday to my spouse. I'm like, did you tell them that in person or did you just write it on social media? I know what we do is our social media has become an online journal. It's become an online collection of records, and I've heard people say that. Well, I want these pictures and these posts to pop back up in 5 years. I want to be reminded of these things, and that's good, but you and I need to understand something. Not everybody on social media or who gets into the computer has pure motives. So do yourselves a favor. Set your profile to, somebody help me, private. And even then, Grant's going to come up to me afterwards and tell me that doesn't even make it safe. Yeah, thanks. I'll tell you what, he's one of my guys. I'm like, Grant, tell me how you could break through this, right? Now, all that to simply say this. Set your profile to private. Keep posting what you're posting, but approve those who can see what you post. And you may think about that and say, why? I want it. So on mine, my profile is a public profile page. It's a professional profile page, only because of what I do and the connections that I have and the purpose for which I use social media. I try then to be very cautious about details that I put on my personal social media page. All of that is because people know that I'm on the road a lot. They can get on our website and find out my travel schedule. If a guy wanted to break into my home, he could pretty much plan it out 3 months in advance. Hey, I know where Joe's going to be. I just wonder if Aaron and the boys are not going to be there, right? You're like, well, then you need a dog and a security system. Well, I have both, but our dog is a golden doodle, right? So not necessarily a guard dog concept. But either way, if that happens, then it happens. If my family's not harmed and it's just a stuff, then so be it, right? My job's not to protect my stuff. My job's to protect my family. And so all of that to simply say this, be aware of what you post about your children online. The next thing and the last thing that I want to get at before we get into some of the safety measures is this idea of sexual content. Yes, Grant, real quick. Yep. Yeah. And why would I suspect that kid I went to high school with was trying to do that? So even in that category, you've got to be cautious. So great point, Grant. Yeah, great point, especially with AI stuff going on. So I want you to think about this idea of sexual content. And of course, you saw that headline. We know back from the pandemic days that the Zoom calls and the Zoom meetings and the online working opened the door, online schooling opened the door to individuals pushing through sexual content when it came to church meetings, when it came to business meetings, and things on those lines. But I want you to contemplate the idea of that happening with your kids. And I would love to think that your kids would never struggle with anything of a sexual nature on the internet. But if you do a general web search regarding sex or sexuality, you'll find out that there are more pages on the internet that deal with that one subject alone than any other subject singularly. And the reason is because it's a big money maker. That's why. And it's a big interest because God made humanity with a desire, at least for the majority, right? A desire for that concept in our life. And so if you can twist that and distort that, and Satan does a great job, right? He takes what God made to be in a pure manner and he offers an impure aspect to it with temptation. And so what you find is the internet's an extension of the work of Satan that he's been doing on that area quite often. But when it comes to what kids find, you and I need to be aware that kids oftentimes will find what they're looking for in various ways and at various stages of their life. So when you look at images or video search engines, the intentional access to pornography, 11 to 13-year-olds, 50% have found images or video search engines, 42% over social media sites, and only 33, dedicated pornographic websites. But that's still 1 out of every 3. But what that tells me is the majority of the time, our kids at that level, they're not necessarily going to the sites that you would have had blocked on your computer. Those of you who go in and you block certain names, you block certain site ratings, what that group of kids have figured out, and of course they know this, is they can do a general search for something, and unless you have locked down a particular search, what's going to happen is when that comes back, instead of viewing all of the website links, they're going to hit the image button up top where it picks up and shows all the images, and that's going to be oftentimes their first introduction to what we used to call soft porn. Now, soft porn is not just nudity. You and I both know that. In days gone by, the Sunday paper used to be delivered, and the Sunday paper oftentimes came with various catalogs or department store full-color printouts. Y'all remember the big, thick Sunday papers? It was in those thick Sunday papers that a whole generation of men were groomed on softcore pornography. Anybody want to kind of think back why I might say that? It's because in those department ads, there was oftentimes, as you flip through them, a section for men's clothing, a section for women's clothing, and then a section for women's undergarments. And you think, well, that's not pornography. And the reality is, to an 11 to 13-year-old who's coming into their own, seeing the female body differently, why am I attracted to this, whereas I used to not be attracted to this, and now I'm seeing that in underwear? Yeah, that's called soft porn. And that was the introduction for a lot of men who turned into people who would go search for things as they aged. Now look, I don't expect anybody to say, yeah, Joe, I just expect it to be a sense of, okay, I understood how that could be. Here's the deal. I've dealt with this for a long time in the sense of helping people deal with pornography. The last episodes of the Hey Joe Show, we have a radio, a podcast that's been going since about 2008. It's been going a long time, called the Hey Joe Show. We have a YouTube channel to that as well. If you get bored one day and want to subscribe to that and you're like, I didn't get enough Joe. Well, there you go. You can get more Joe. But the idea was the last season that I did was 17 episodes on pornography. and helping people break free and find hope. So I put a plea out on social media, and most of my social media contacts are members of the church. But I put a plea out and I said, here's what I'm doing with the show. If you are at a point in your journey, or if you've ever struggled in the past, that you could come on the show and tell your story, then I would love to interview you on the show. I said it's not about your name. If you want to be anonymous, that's fine. It's about us trying to talk about this in a way that people who struggle can find hope and break free. I had to turn people away from coming on the show. There were that many. Eventually it got to a point I can't just continue to do so many episodes on this, but I interviewed young men, I interviewed grown men that were older, I interviewed a young lady, I interviewed a husband and wife couple, I interviewed counselors from various aspects, some addiction and trauma therapists, some marriage and family therapists, about the impact within a marriage on this. And here's what was interesting in dealing with the grown men specifically, but even with the young lady, is the addiction didn't start when they became adults. Most of them, when they hit puberty, that's when it started. And they all thought something. They all thought that when they got married, it would go away. Because when you can have the real thing instead of just a picture, surely I'll no longer need the picture or the video. And all of them said that was a lie. Because it really isn't even about that. It's hard to explain to a wife or to a husband in some situations where there's an addiction. But here's why I bring that up. I bring it up because it started at the levels that we're trying to address now, and why we need to establish safety measures now. Because you're not just talking about my kid being 13, turning 14, and being a good student. You're talking my kid who's 13 becoming a grown man one day and having a marriage and having children. And the reality is the residual effect of pornographic addiction plays and spills into their marriage. You want to find an unhappy couple, I can't guarantee it, but I'm pretty close, a high percentage, there would be pornographic addiction. Or at some point in their life in the past, there would be. Husband comparing wife to the images that he sees on the internet. Husband comparing what the person on the internet does, but his wife won't do that. She doesn't respond the same as the woman on the internet. Or, women who watch it, they're watching the women's bodies. I don't know how many, it's quite compelling, but there's always a sense of inadequacy with a woman who's watching that. That's what I'm supposed to do. I'll never look that good. I'll never be able to do that, and so on and so forth. And why would I bring all that up? Because there is a residual damage effect that happens when parents disengage when their kids are entering puberty. I say all that only to say this, then, that you and I must be aware. When you look at this concept of teenagers, especially between the ages of 13 and 17, 73% have watched pornography online. 54% first saw porn at the age of 13. Other key findings, 15% of teens responded said they first saw online pornography at the age of 10 or younger. So it's not even just when they become teenagers. It's oftentimes when they get their cell phones. You remember how connected we are? What are the statistics? Well, the statistics are more and more young people are getting devices at an earlier age. Isn't it interesting then that the viewing of that happens at an earlier age? While the vast majority of respondents said they've seen pornography, nearly half indicated they had done so intentionally. Most, I would still say the majority don't set out to see what we would call the bad stuff. But you remember me talking about what used to be called soft pornography. That's the door that opens. And if it was interesting then what happens if I go a little further? And what happens if I go a little further? And what happens if I go a little further? Eventually, though, you find that a good portion are looking for it intently. The majority of the teens who reported this survey said they had seen pornography and said they feel okay about the amount of pornography they watch. I'll never forget a time in one of the Carolinas, I think it was North Carolina, I spoke at a youth camp. And sometimes I'll speak at youth camps. That's not uncommon. There were multiple young men who responded. That night, I think it was dealing with sexual purity. And multiple young men responded because of pornographic addictions. And as we prayed for them, they started talking after the service was over, and I was just listening. I try to do a lot of listening, and they started sharing information. They started sharing what sites, even there at the front of a church camp. They started talking about how these sites get passed around at school And it's like, well, how did your child ever even know that site existed? Well, oftentimes it's because a peer who maybe had an older sibling who had been addicted or been looking at it told the younger child, and the younger child wants to, kind of look older, so they go telling other kids about what they've been seeing and what the website is, and all of a sudden a curious kid goes to a website, and if mom or dad or grandma and grandpa are unaware, then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, that blows my mind, and why am I interested in that? Well, that's where it gets scary, and it's not even just over those areas. I'll offer this to you. It can be through apps, and apps change, so please don't take this as an exhaustive list. As a matter of fact, I would probably venture to say there are more apps out there than these that you need to be aware of. And these are a little dated, quite honestly, but the idea of all these apps and what they do, sometimes there are apps out there that will hide pictures that you'll never know about. One that's more notorious is it looks like a calculator. And so a mom or a dad or grandma or grandpa picks up the phone and just looks at the face of the apps, and they see a calculator there. They might not think anything about it, but the way it works is you put in a code in the calculator and it opens up a storage, kind of like an iCloud storage, where they can hide images. Others are where they put in profiles or they reach out for people that they want to hook up with, right? Casually meet up for inappropriate sexual content. So there's numerous apps out there, and these are just some. You can take a picture of that if you want, but I want to make you aware that when it comes to some of this, sexting is not only over text messaging, it's also over social media. And so statistics are showing that some of these, like Snapchat, have become the number one way that teenagers oftentimes are engaging in inappropriate sexual content. When it comes to texting or sexting and things on those lines. And it's not just teenagers, it's adults who are posing as teenagers as well. And why is that significant? Well, because many people probably gave up at Facebook. Many adults probably gave up at Instagram. Some of you may have held fast and you were like, nope, if the kids are on it, I need to be aware. And I'll even be real in my situation that sometimes it becomes very laborious where you're looking at it going, it's always changing. By the time I think I figured something out, I got to learn something new. And you do, and here's why. Because Satan doesn't stop. Satan doesn't quit just because something new came out. But a lot of times, parents and grandparents don't even know the intent behind some of these. Do you know Snapchat, when it first came out, was started by 3 college students. 2 guys were high on marijuana, and they had an idea, how can we get girls to share inappropriate pictures? They didn't have the intellect back then to come up with the app and the avenue, so they went to a computer genius in their dorm floor who was a friend and said, here's our idea. And that guy said, I think we can create that. So they created something that was called Peekaboo. Do you know Snapchat, when it first came out, was called Peekaboo? And it was started with the intent, how can we get girls to share inappropriate photos of themselves? Well, let's create a situation where the photos disappear after a set number of seconds. And of course, nowadays we know that screenshots can be taken, some can be saved, but there's a dark, dark side to a lot of these areas that maybe you think, well, Snapchat's not that big a deal. Well, if you choose to go down a pathway, you can get into areas of these apps that really are that concerning. So just kind of be aware of that. It's not just, hey, let me see your text messages. It's also what apps are on their phone, and you spending time on their phone interacting with those apps and maybe even having them show you what they are. And then if you don't figure them out or you've never heard of that app before, go to the internet and look that app up and find out what that app is. Now, the other side of that is you can make it where they can't download apps to their phone unless they get approved through your account. But eventually what's going to happen is this. The social media sites and even like Apple or Android are going to say your child is no longer counted as a child in our standards. So therefore, they no longer have a child's account. And then all of a sudden, you're like, okay, they took away something from me, so I hope I have multiple layers of defense. I want to show you some of these. What can you do to shore it up? And then the lesson is yours. We'll take a break. You can actually go into your router and change what's called the DNS of your router. Now, some of you get nervous about this, and I don't necessarily advocate messing with your router. I don't mess with my router, but this came from a tech guy at a private Christian school in Middle Tennessee who has over 2,000 connection points to the internet at their school. And I was asking him some questions. What advice would you give, some measures to shore up the internet and safety measures within your home? And he said, well, one that you can do is what's called 1.1.1.1. And what you do is you actually filter your home at the router level, at the DNS level. And you go in there and you change that. And of course, you can go online and look up 1.1.1.1, find out more information about it. And if you're comfortable doing that, that's step one. Now, you're going to find I'm a believer in multiple layers of defense, not one. So if you're that kind of guy, then go in there and do it. Or lady, Grant.
That's literally what I was telling you about earlier.
Oh, the DNS setting?
No, that's owned by the people who make
The lava lamp stuff. Interesting. Yeah, that's pretty neat. Pretty neat. Yeah, I told you over there at the donuts that Grant rocked my world with lava lamp technology. Yeah. Anyhow, 1.1.1.1 would be one that I would encourage you to look at if you want to be on that level. Another one would be this. You can also purchase things that can be hooked up to your router that would serve as a control mechanism and a filter mechanism. This is called the Circle. Disney used to be affiliated with it. I don't know if they still are, but this is the Circle Home Plus. And of course, you can see there that it can deal with Wi-Fi devices at home, maybe mobile devices anywhere, custom settings by family members. So if you want you and your wife to be on one custom setting, but your children to be on another, or your grandchildren to be on another, it can do that. Screen time limits, if you want to set it where the internet goes off at a certain time to a certain device, even if it's not a phone, but let's say it's a game system that you have in an area where your child could get to it. You're not sure if they're getting up in the middle of the night playing video games, or maybe it's in their room. Well, then you can turn off the internet to that video game system where at least they wouldn't be able to go online and play games that way. Content filtering, preset of times. You can pause it. You can set it for bedtimes. You can even give rewards. So let's say you want a reward-based concept when it comes to technology. Hey, you did your chores this week without mom and dad having to ask you. You're going to get 30 extra minutes on Friday evening of video game time. Well, you can reward your child. And one of the things I do like about this, and we had it for a time, we no longer have it on our device, there's updated versions of it, is that I could see those things and do those things when I wasn't at home, because it's all operated over the phone. So you could turn off things immediately right from your phone. You could say, okay, my child, maybe they didn't do their chores, or maybe they've been struggling with obedience. Then you're like, okay, I'm shutting the phone down right now. Boom. And you can do it no matter where you're at, right? And so that was another area. So the DNS level, the Circle concept, and then I mentioned this as well. There are numerous subscription services that you could look at when it comes to filtering things out, but also dealing with inappropriate content if it ever does show up. Covenant Eyes is the one that we recommend, and there's a link on our website. Obviously, we became an affiliate of theirs. But the reason I recommend it is because of what it does and what it allows you to do. When I was in California speaking one year, there was a gentleman who said, I'm going to gift my wife, or I gave my wife a gift. That's what he said. And I thought to myself, what do you mean? Well, he put Covenant Eyes on his devices, on his phone. And of course, Covenant Eyes was started as an accountability partner concept. If you struggled with pornographic addiction, pornography usage, you could set it up where there was a covenant partner that if you were struggling, being tempted to search for something, they would get a notification on their phone saying, hey, Joe is struggling at this moment. Your covenant partner would call you up. Hey, Joe, let's talk. How are you doing? What's going on? I got a notification. And Joe says, well, I know you would. I've had a rough day at work. I'm sitting here at home being alone. I'm really struggling. And you as a covenant partner would say, well, man, let's talk about other ways to deal with this. Or you say, hey, I'm coming over. Let me take you out and get a hamburger, right? And it's not a bashing. It was never intended to bash. It was intended to intervene kind of concept. Well, Covenant Eyes has a lot that it offers that go along with that concept, but that families can use too. Number one, the covenant partner concept. So in our family, we have two accounts we pay for that we subscribe to. Aaron and I are on one, and then the kids are on another. But when a covenant concept comes along, we have access and we get notifications if anything ever were to pop up. Now, it also operates on a VPN, and then it takes screenshots randomly of your device. Now, you may look at that and go, I don't want Big Brother taking screenshots of my device. Well, if you're not looking at anything that you don't need, number one, or that you shouldn't be looking at, you shouldn't be worried, but I hate to tell you this, there's screenshots probably being taken anyway and being stored someplace that you're not even aware of. But all that to simply say this, I want you to think about from a parenting standpoint. If your children know, and it goes back to the addiction thing, right? If an addict knows that at any point in time my phone could have a picture taken of it and sent to my covenant partner, then that's going to take away this sense of privacy, this sense of nobody will ever find out. And therefore, that may be enough to persuade the person who is having a weak moment to go find another outlet for their frustration, right? But from a parenting standpoint, if you were to tell your child, hey, I just want you to know this, that not only is it going to flag content that you shouldn't be looking at, but it's going to take random screenshots of your phone, and you just need to be aware that your mom and I will have access to those. Now, you don't do that because you think your kid's bad. You know what you're trying to do is you're trying to take away secrecy. That's what you're trying to take away. And, you know, in our family, it's been a pretty known thing, and I think we've been pretty consistent with it. From time to time, there are going to be things that you didn't intend, right? How many of you ever been punching in a website and you hit return before you actually got the website correct? Yeah, and then you're like, whoa, didn't intend for that to happen, right? And it may not be the worst thing in the world, but it may be on the side of, oh, that didn't need to come up on my screen. And what I do love is that we have a very open relationship with our kids in the sense that they know that mom and dad we're not dumb. We know that can happen because that's happened at times in our world. So if something like that comes up, get off of it immediately and then call me or text me to let me know what just happened. Because if I find out about it from them, then they know they're not going to get in trouble. Now, here's the deal, and I know they're sitting here, but they know this. They're two smart boys. That fosters trust. It fosters communication. It fosters openness. Now, they also know this, though. If they don't tell me and I find out in the report, then that's a whole different level of conversation. Now, all that simply to say this, I want to foster open communication. I want to filter out as much as I can, but I also want to have those teachable moments, right? So Covenant Eyes is one that we recommend, and you can find out more about it. On top of all of that, the phones themselves have settings that you can go into. Under the iOS devices, there's what's called screen time. You can go in and set up, especially on a family plan, you can set up parameters, you can turn off, you can set downtime from there, you can set rating levels on the phone. And that's why when I talked to you yesterday about we allowed that in our home, it's because we don't just allow it and then say, well, I hope nothing happens. We take a very intentional, deliberate, and purposed approach when it comes even to locking down the phone. And so you can lock it down at the phone level. You can add a subscription concept to it that would also be a further measure of locking down. And it's not just for iOS's. It's also on Android-based phones. They have what's called Dashboard, and you can actually get what's called Family Link. If you operate on Androids in your home, then your Family Link and your Dashboard are where you want to go for that. On top of that, your cell phone carriers can help you. So you can actually go through Verizon, AT&T, or whatever it is, and there are family filtering concepts at the cellular plan level that you can get to be another level of defense. And so that's just one that you see there, Secure Family, AT&T Secure Family. But within that, what it does is it gives location tracking, control what they have access to, double check their online activities, set location alerts, and an SOS alert in case there is danger. Now, I told you I'm a multi-approach concept. Those are only on the cell phones and tablets. Now, I look at it like a castle. If a prominent family were in a castle, they probably wouldn't just put up a fence around the perimeter of that castle. They might have a moat. They might actually clear the field, get rid of a bunch of trees before the moat is ever approached. And they would do that so they can see the oncoming danger, right? They don't put the tree line right up next to the castle. And the reason they didn't is because they wanted to be able to see the enemy having to rush over an open field. They would put a moat that enemy would have to go across if the drawbridge were not down, right? On top of that, they may put alligators in the water. I don't know. But they wanted something to be destructive. They wanted something to take away the advantage. On top of that, those walls were going to be really thick, and they were going to have cutouts at the top so that soldiers could drop tar, could, off the top, and burn the people below. They could shoot arrows at the people below. They could drop fireballs at the people below. All of that before they ever got into the castle. If they did breach through the door of the castle or scaled the walls, typically there was a high point in the castle where the most prominent family would go. It was either on a hill or it was in a high tower. Why would they do that? Because height is an advantage, right, in warfare. Now, all of that plays into the approach that we try to take in our home, and that's this: multiple levels of defense. Do not just say, well, we have a filter on our internet, therefore we're okay. Multiple levels of defense. Your goal is to make it so difficult for that stuff to get in, right? Now, here's the deal. Even doing that, don't be surprised if it can sneak through. Because I'm not sure there's a 100% foolproof plan at all. That's why intentional, deliberate, and purpose parenting is so important in grandparenting. I'll throw these out there for you to consider, and then we'll be done. VidAngel is something we use when it comes to watching TV shows. How many of y'all have ever heard of VidAngel? We subscribe to VidAngel, and as a matter of fact, just about everything we watch at home, outside of the Dick Van Dyke Show, which we were watching in the basement last night, comes through VidAngel. And maybe even at times Dick Van Dyke will go through VidAngel just because we've become so accustomed to VidAngels where we watch things. And of course, what VidAngel allows you to do is you can take a rated R movie and turn it into a 45-minute movie real quick, or a 30-minute movie. You can take out scenes, you can take out references to swear words, you can take out violence, you can take out immodesty. You can take out so many things. And as a parent and grandparent, if you really wanted to watch that show and your kids are there with you, you can actually sit and watch it without having to blush because something got through and having to go, oh, I hope my kids didn't pick up on that. Right? So VidAngel's a good one. VidAngel doesn't work with everything, so ClearPlay is the other one that I recommend. You can actually set that up to work with, like Disney Plus will go through ClearPlay. And so if you want to watch the Marvel movies, that's the way I encourage you to watch the Marvel movies, because there are words in the Marvel movies. There are at times inappropriate dress in the Marvel movies. And so ClearPlay is a good one to pick up what VidAngel doesn't pick up. On top of that, you have other resources like PluggedIn.com or ScreenIt. We rarely go to a movie theater, I will tell you that, in our home. And it's not to say we don't, we rarely do. And that's because the movies don't filter out stuff. But you can be proactive when it comes to what movies you go see. And so before you just go see a movie, look it up. What is the cuss word count? And they'll even tell you this many references, this many uses of this word, this many uses of that word, this many uses of that word. This is the sexual content. This is the spiritual content. This is the violence. And at the end of the day, you're going, my number one goal is a spiritual goal to make sure my children love Jesus and want to follow after Him. Is this movie something that people who have that goal should want their children to watch? Now, I will offer to you, should you watch it? Well, you got to make that call on your own, right? But I would offer to you that if we're supposed to, according to Philippians chapter 4, verse 8, set our mind on things that are pure and lovely and of good repute, then we probably shouldn't be ingesting some of the things that we ingest either. So it's been a long time since we've gone to see a movie that was even rated PG-13. I'm going to throw this out there. Y'all know in the 1960s, the MPAA redid their rating system. And what was used to be rated X in today's rating is now rated R. What was rated R is now today rated PG-13. What was rated PG-13 is now rated PG. You get it, right? That changed in the 1960s. So imagine before the 1960s, you wanted to go see a movie today, in today's ratings that was R, you would have to pay for a ticket to go see something that was rated X. That's the change. So be cautious what you watch as well, because you're trying to guard your soul, right? And I usually say this to the wives. Wives, I know you want to guard the heart and the soul of your husband. And we get pretty blunt at times, and I ask the wives, I say, how many women can your husband see in their underwear on the screen before you're offended? How many women do you want him to see topless on the screen before it bothers you? And of course, men, you know what their answer is, right? I don't want him looking at anybody but me. I want to be his everything in his life. Well, then, try to guard the heart of your spouse. That's a big deal. That's a big deal. Anyhow, there's more to be said, but you know the goal. The goal is the heart. Let's have a prayer, and we'll take a break for about 10 minutes, and we'll come back and have one more lesson. But is there more donuts over there? I don't even know. There are. All right, y'all finish up the donuts and coffee and check out the tables. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, thank you for loving us, for smiling down upon us. And Lord, today we are just mindful of our kids. We're mindful of the pitfalls that exist out there. And Lord, it's our desire as parents and grandparents that we would not pretend that we can just skip through life whistling zippity-doo-dah, and that because we take a lackadaisical approach, that Satan will take a lackadaisical approach. Lord, help us to understand he never quits, and that you've called us to a high calling, and Lord, help us to answer that call. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Let's take a 10-minute break. We'll be back in about 10:20-ish, okay? 10:20-ish. Let's go ahead and get started. Everybody in the donut area, Camden, can you let them know we're going to get started, please? We're going to go ahead and get started. Yeah. Hello, hello. Testing 1, 2, 3, 4. Testing 1, 2. Yeah, thanks. All right. We're going to go ahead and get started with this last lesson for the morning, and then we will be free to enjoy the day. This lesson deals with some of the, I don't want to say negatives. Today's not a negative day, but it is definitely a get an attention day when it comes to what we're studying, and thus the idea of safety must be prioritized. In this lesson, though, what I would love to go over are what you see on the screen, things that we need to be aware of: addiction, anxiety, and digital reputation. It's not just about, as we were just talking out there in the foyer, it wasn't just about, are my children being targeted by child predators? Are they addicted to pornography or things like that? We're seeing some correlation, at least such that demands attention, between levels of anxiety, addictive behavior, and behavior that shows that an addiction may be there, but then also long-term reputational effects when it comes to media and media usage, especially social media concepts. And of course, why do I bring that up? Because oftentimes young people are either going to be engaged with YouTube, they're going to be engaged with gaming, or they're going to be engaged with some social media aspect. Those are going to be the top 3 areas where they will spend the majority of their time. Well, what I want to know as a parent is then, okay, what about the emotional well-being of my children? Not just the physical well-being, not just the impact that it could have in their marriages in the future, the impact that it could have regarding their parenting with their own children in the future and so forth, but what about their emotional well-being? What about their mental well-being now? And is there something that is ahead that I need to be aware of and that they need to be aware of, so that I can have conversations with them regarding future employment, regarding potential college enrollment, things along those lines when it comes to reputation. Now, before I get going, I will say this. It's Brennan, right? Your husband, Brennan, and Grant offered something to this group, which I find amazing. Those safety measures that you saw on the screen interest you in any way, shape, or form, but they overwhelm you, then get in line, because you're like, I'm a little overwhelmed by setting things, and how do I go into my phone and do this? Well, both of these gentlemen came up to me afterwards, and they are very aware of the DNS setting on the router and how to change that and why to change that. And they have offered to you, if you want that help, that they will help you set your router up to filter out content, things on those lines. And even, I'm sure, on your devices, they would help you. If you're overwhelmed, they would help you navigate through those selective menus if you want that. So oftentimes when I show those screens and show those slides, there's a sense that people come up and are like, I don't know how to do that. It makes me a little nervous to do that. Well, that's okay. You've got two individuals here that would love to help you if you'll allow them to do so. So just kind of get with one of them afterwards, or down the road. You guys have each other's contacts, I'm sure, that y'all can get in touch with each other. So, all right, as we begin this particular lesson, the last one of the morning, I want to start off with this image. And the reason I start off with this image is because it drives home a point. Now, I showed you a Lego block yesterday, and of course the question was, what is it designed for? Well, I'm not going to ask you what a sponge is designed for, but if you know the design of the sponge and its impact and the effect that it has, then you know that a sponge will absorb whatever environment it finds itself, as long as it's a liquid, obviously, in this illustration, right? So if you spill something on the floor, maybe you have a mop that has a sponge, and the sponge is going to absorb the contents that are on the ground. If you're washing your car, you're washing your boat, and you have a sponge, you dip that dry sponge in a bucket of water, and you expect it to absorb the environment of which it is, submerged. Well, the reality is your kids in the adolescent development of their life, they're like that sponge. Your grandchildren are like that sponge. And that's why what we're talking about is significant. When you start talking about, well, hey, at least they're not watching bad things, that at least they're not addicted to bad things, at least we're filtering out some bad things, those are all good statements, and I would encourage you to that end. However, I also want you to understand that it's not just the things that they're watching that impact them. When you and I think about a sponge absorbing the content around it, there's going to be an impact that is felt, an effect that is seen. And what we're seeing in those who do studies and those who report that the more that technology becomes a central aspect of their lives, the higher levels of anxiety that exist. Now, there's a couple ways to think about this. Did technology cause the high levels of anxiety? Or were the high levels of anxiety already there and technology is a coping mechanism? Well, I don't know. What came first, the chicken or the egg? And somebody's going to say, well, the chicken, because God created animals. Okay, but you understand the phrase, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Was it a cause or was it an effect? Is technology the cause of anxiety, or is anxiety the cause of such high levels of technological usage? And I don't know if I have an answer for that. I don't know if I've seen an answer for that in society. But what I have seen is that we today have a more anxious generation of adolescents than have been reported in the past. And I had to be careful how I said that, right? Because I think now what we're doing is we're starting to pay attention more to levels of anxiety than maybe in times past. But I also believe that we have a lot of young people who exist with this weight. They live every day with a weight, and more studies are showing that that's not trending down. Anxiety is described as an abnormal and overwhelming sense of apprehension and fear, often marked by physical signs. What are physical signs of anxiety? Tension, sweating, increased pulse rate, by doubt concerning the reality and nature of the threat. In other words, I'm anxious about what could be, and I'm anxious about what is. Now, you and I have had times of anxiousness before, right? You took a test, maybe you got a little anxious before the test. Some people just are anxious test takers. Some people are great test takers. Some people get worked up, and they would be able to do their homework and get A's throughout everything else. But as soon as they sit down to take a test, it's like the anxiety levels increase. That's not anxiety. Those are anxious moments. Anxiety is where you live in a constant state of addressing or at least being concerned about threats that are real or threats that are not real. What could happen? What could go wrong? What is going wrong? What do I perceive is going wrong? What do I perceive as a big deal? Now, I'm not suggesting that we didn't have anxiety in the past, but it seems like we're having a lot more being diagnosed with high levels of anxiety today. Thus, we're seeing an increase in medications being prescribed to deal with anxieties. And I mentioned that last night. Sometimes that might be needed for a time. But I often have to wonder, is there any relationship, any correlation between this big snowball of technology and the amount of anxiety that our young people are feeling? Well, here's what's interesting. 61% of teenagers today report they feel a lot of pressure to get good grades. 29% feel a lot of pressure to look good. 28% feel a lot of pressure to fit in socially. 21% pressured to be involved in extracurricular activities and to be good at sports. When it comes to social media usage, 45% feel overwhelmed by all the drama on social media. 26% say social media made them feel worse about their own lives. 43% feel pressure to post content that make them look good. And 37% feel pressure to share things that will get likes and comments. And I find it quite interesting that in our culture, in our time growing up, it's not that we didn't feel anxiety. We just didn't, I don't think our source of anxiety was the same. I mean, think about what we've done over the course of time in our country. We've gone from there being self-esteem that was not artificially created, but was authentically created by there being winners and losers. I mean, you used to play t-ball. I used to play t-ball, baseball, whatever it was. And there were trophies that went out to the first place team. Maybe the second place team got a medal or some type of smaller prize, but everybody who played Little League Baseball didn't get a participation trophy. Now, you can look at that and say, well, I want my child to have a participation trophy. And that's fine, but I want you to think what's happened over the years, and this was quite interesting. In the 1980s, spilling forward to today, we in America have set out to artificially create self-esteem. And in so doing, what we did, you can look back in the time period of the 80s where they would have a color all number ones this color, color all number twos this color, or color all evens this, color all odds that. And what it would do in their coloring in the numbers, it would eventually say, you are special. And that was a program that was initiated in the 1980s. Look, do I believe that all kids are special? Yes, I do. But I believe all kids are special because they're made in the image of God, right? Not because some piece of paper said, hey, we want to build you up and make you feel special. But all of that, you say, well, why was that a big deal? It was a big deal because when you artificially create self-esteem and you artificially build someone up, what happens when they encounter a situation where they're not always looked at as special and they're not always looked at as a winner? Some kids don't know how to handle that. And so what we've done as a society is now we're afraid to say there's a winner, here's a winner's trophy, and there's the losers. We don't even use the word loser anymore unless kids are walking around trying to insult somebody. We'll just say something along the lines of, they're not losers, they just didn't win. And we get that. We understand why that is said, but at the core of all of that is we believe that our kids are too fragile. And because we believe they're fragile, we have changed our approach to them. And in changing our approach to them, we believe we've done them a favor. But what we've really done is we've created a different message. And the message is, we don't believe you're capable of dealing with adversity. Now, I didn't come up with that. There's actually a coined phrase, a type of parenting that's called lawnmower parenting. You've heard of helicopter parenting, right? Helicopter parenting is where that mother or that father always seem to be hovering right above their kid, and they're never going to let that kid out. And look, to some extent, people who fall under that category, if you allow me to put that into quotes, I think they're being responsible at times. Sometimes they can be overbearing. Let's just be honest, right? It's okay for your child to do some things without you being right there hovering next to them. There's some health benefits, mental benefits to that. But a lawnmower parent, they want to mow down any obstacle in the way of their child. And in doing so, what they believe they're doing is they're making it better for their child than they had it. But the truth is, your child needs to struggle through some things. They need to feel the difficulty of overcoming conflict or overcoming obstacles. And because what that does is it creates within them a sense that they can do it. They can achieve. They can figure it out. Right? And that is actually a natural self-esteem booster. Now, why do I put all of that out there? I put all of that out there because if we're sponges and we soak up the environment that we're in, and we've created an approach typically to young people that we believe you're fragile, we believe you're special, what happens in a world that doesn't always affirm that? Well, it leads to anxiety. It leads to difficulty. And I find it quite interesting over and over again. We could see quotes of individuals who grow up in this world, and what they're showing is that, you know what? There's actually some fabrication of what's taking place. And the fabrication is you can put out what you want. And why would you do that? Because you're trying to regulate the impact of other people in your life, and you're trying to regulate reputation. Why would you do that? Why would you not just be authentic? And I know that's a catchword today in our society. Younger people hunger for authenticity. Well, but are we actually practicing that online, or is that just something we tell churches? Right? I've heard that numerous times. They want us to be authentic. What does that mean? Well, it means just be real. Quit trying to put on an air. But do we do that when it comes to social media? No. You know what we do? We clean the corner of the house up behind us before we take a picture. And we get our hair done up right, and our makeup has to be done right. And then we do a squat with a duck lip. And you're like, that's not real life. Why are you doing that? Why don't you take a picture where your hair's not done and you don't have makeup on and your house is a mess? You know why? Because we tend to put stuff out there that makes us feel good and to look like our ideal self. Well, guess what? You can only do that for so long before all of a sudden your perceived image takes over. And when you're afraid that other people will see you for who you really are instead of who you want them to see you as, all of a sudden then, is that a measure that's too high to live up to? Is that a constant that's too high to live up to? You as an adult look at that and you'd say, Joe, if I'm being honest, maybe I do that sometimes. And I think sometimes we do as adults. That's why I believe, and ladies, don't throw tomatoes at me, but the levels of anxiety amongst our grown women today are much higher than they used to be as well. Happiness levels are much lower than they used to be. And when you really start looking around and saying, why is that the case? I firmly believe the more we become reliant on social media and us trying to live up to our own perceived reputation, that it's a bar that's too high to reach. That when you step back and you say, this is just me. I'm not trying to be unliked, but I realize not everybody's going to say, oh, okay, we see that your world is phenomenal and so exciting. Well, the worlds aren't always exciting. Hair's not always done, makeup's not always on, and the house is not always clean. Guess what? We all know that. So why do we try to present it another way? Why do we care if people like us, our comments, if they share our comments or our pictures? Why does that bother us? Why does it give us success or happiness when we see that other people hit the like button? And beyond that, why does it make us feel bad? Now, why do I address that to adults? I address that to adults because you're processing this through your adult developed brain. Adolescents don't have an adult developed brain. Their brain is still much more moldable and shapeable and impressionable. And so in a culture that is steeped with adults who live that way, what impact do you think that has on kids? Well, I mentioned to you last night this idea of fear of missing out and the way that anxiety can play into that. I think it's quite interesting that when you start talking about fear of missing out, you see studies like Grace, a 13-year-old who said, I felt like I was the only one not there. I was thinking they're having a good time without me. Then I just felt really, really bad about myself. And I find it interesting that why can I not see other people having a good time and feel really, really good for them? Right? Man, they're having a great time. Look at them, man. They're out there on a Friday night. They're not in immoral fun, good fun, right? They're having a great time. I just feel so happy for them. But that's not the way we process things, is it? Not especially when it's our people, our group, because the only thing that we think of is, why was I not invited? There must be something wrong. Why was I the only one left out? And what happens is, if we're not careful, we fall into this self-pity concept. Well, some of that is because they live in a constant state of reporting what's going on, who's at what, right? And sometimes that's not done to hurt people, but the default of that could be very hurtful, especially with the adolescent trying to figure out what was wrong and why they were left out. I want to share with you, if you're wondering, how do I know if my child is just having some anxious moments or if they're having anxiety? I want you to see these 4 areas, because studies will say that anxiety will demonstrate itself in the life of teens in one of these areas. And I would offer to you in our own lives as well. It's either going to be emotional, physical, behavioral, cognitive, or some combination of all of these. So what emotional signs do they say accompany anxiety? And what I want you to do is I want you to think about the young people in your life, whether or not they're showing signs of emotional signs of anxiety. They don't get excited very often. They're unhappy, may seem depressed, seem agitated, anxious, aloof, and irritable. They get angry and overwhelmed easily by simple things and may also feel helpless and hopeless about the situation. The next time your teenager snaps at you for no reason, you could know that he is stressed. And I would say to myself, no duh. Some of these you're looking at going, unhappy? Isn't that just teenage hormones? Depressed, isn't that just teenage hormones? Yes, and that's why you really need to know your child. And the reason you need to know your child is because if you don't know your child before they become a teenager, then when they swing into some of these changes, it's going to be hard for you to catch up, right? And then you've also got to allow, as your teenager does go through the adolescent years, that they're going to struggle with the hormones, they're going to struggle with self-esteem, they're going to struggle with these things. That's why you start raising a teenager before they become a teenager. You start developing a relationship with that teenager before they become a teenager, so that as they're going through those teen years, you're not trying to establish something, you're merely helping something along that's already been established. Does that make sense? So those of you who have very young children, you're in a perfect state right now. Start now helping them process what they're going through. Start now by listening to them. I know the first thing we want to do as parents is lecture. We want to tell them what they're going through. We want to explain to them what we went through. But I want you to think back in your life to those who made the biggest impact on your life. And what you're probably going to find out is that the people who made the biggest impacts in your life are the people who are willing to listen and to be patient and to offer guidance in a manner that didn't come across as a lecture, but came across as a mentor who was guiding. Now you're saying, Joe, that just sounds fluffy. You just said we've raised kids to be fragile. Yeah, but some of this is relational. You've got to actually be relational. I've known some people in my life who have said, well, you just tell them the truth. You just drop the truth on them. Yeah, you could do that. And you may be 100% truthful, but you may never have the opportunity to speak truth into their life again. That's because a relationship is required for truth to be accepted. You've got to establish that with your children as well. When it comes to physical signs, tired or fatigued, headache, constipation, nausea, dizziness, palpitations, and loss of appetite, your teen may lose interest in sports and other physical activities as well. Some teens may lose or gain weight, while girls may experience a change in their period cycle. Behavioral changes, fidgety and displaying nervous habits like nail biting, restless pacing, moving around constantly, and so on. Crying, isolating self from friends and family, being moody or easily irritable. That just sounds like teenagers. Not bothered about their appearance and not showing much interest in activities that once gave them pleasure. Cognitive symptoms. Stress in teens can also impact their cognitive abilities like memory. You may think that your teen is neglecting his chores or being careless, but for all you know, he may have been stressed and forgot about it. Other cognitive symptoms include being irrational, the inability to focus, negative perspective, and poor judgment. Now, on these I would offer, I didn't write any of that. Right in the book, you can see the sourcings of all that. But here's the reason why that's significant is because during the adolescent years, there's going to be a lot of changes. You got to hold on. It's like riding a horse. I don't know how many of y'all have ever ridden horses. We used to own horses. If you've ever ridden a horse that a horse has got a little crazy and wanted to dart back to the barn, you got to hold on, and you can't let that happen. You don't want the horse to run back to the barn. You want that horse to be in control as it goes back to the barn because the horse knows what it's about to happen. You're about to get off. It's about to have the pressure off, and it's about to probably be fed, right? So it runs in that way. But if you've ever been on a horse that runs out of control, that's like parenting through the teen years if you're not careful, right? Hold on. It will pass. But the reality is they need your guidance through that. But if you're going to guide them, then you've got to be aware of what's going on in their life. Not just the cause, but also the impact. And sometimes if you don't know if they're spending too much time with technology, one of the ways that you can figure that out is by saying, I'm seeing higher levels of anxiety in your life. Right? Now, I'm not saying it's technology, but what I am saying is, Joe just gave us these 4 areas, and you're hitting about all 5, 6 of them. Right? In other words, you're overdoing the anxiety. I, as a parent, have to step back and go, what could be contributing to this? Is this just natural hormonal change? Or is it really true that the time spent with technology, if it's too high, is showing that levels of anxiety increase? So therefore, maybe it's time, we're gonna put the phones down for the next 3 or 4 days. Well, what do I need the phone for? Well, let's talk about that. I want you to be able to call me. I want you to be able to communicate with your mom and I, text us if you need something. But the reality is, over the next 3 or 4 days, you're not going to be out of our home. It's Monday. There's no youth event that you're going to. You don't have to work those next few days. So what we're going to do is we're going to put the phone down, and we're not going to be involved with technology for the next 2 or 3 days. Now, you got to be aware of something. Even the teenagers are going to be like, I got to text my friends. I got to message my friends. I need to play my games. And that's where you as a parent have got to realize you're not there to be your parents' friends. They have plenty of friends. They don't have more parents. You need to be their parent. And so that's where you say, well, I'm sorry, well, I've got plans. We're going to, and don't just leave it a void, right? Oftentimes you take something away and then you don't fill it with something. All they feel is an emptiness. So what you say is this, you know what? We're going to put the phones down, but we've got some neat things planned. Number one, you're not working. Number two, I'm going to step away from whatever my responsibilities are, and we're going to spend Monday, I've got this planned, we're going to do this, and we're going to go, have a picnic. I'm just throwing some things out, right? We're going to go on Tuesday, we're going to go on a bike ride down the Greenway, and we're going to do that. And on Wednesday, your dad says that he's going to take off work because he knows that you want to, and I'll just throw out play golf. And so he's going to come home and play golf with you on Wednesday. Now you look at that and you go, you're coddling the kid. And I'm offering to you, no, you're not. You're trying to accomplish something in their life. And that is step away from what could be causing them anxiety. And what you're going to find is this. You'll never regret the one-on-one time you spend with your children. You won't, because eventually they will be out of your house. And you will wish you had more one-on-one time. Ask the grandparents in this room. Now, here's the deal. When you start doing that, you're going to realize their anxiety levels go down. And not only will their anxiety levels go down, your anxiety levels will go down. And guess what happens when your anxiety levels go down? Your parenting changes. Your marriage changes. Your parenting all of a sudden might become less stressful. Your marriage could become less stressful. And you'd say, Joe, can getting rid of technology, at least stepping away for a short time, really have that big of an impact? Yes. Quite simply put, yes, it could. Number two, and we talk about this idea of addictions. We talked in the last session about the impact that sexual content could have on our kids, but I don't want to just focus on that. I want to talk about addictions in general, and one of the ones that people usually don't think about is the ability to be addicted to video games. Now, you can be addicted to any number of things because addiction only requires a repetitive behavior that is rewarded in your brain to the extent that your brain releases dopamine, and the channels of the dopamine being released are so strong that you struggle having the release of dopamine in other areas of your life, right? So in the way that works, imagine water that comes down and is flowing across a field into a ditch. That water is going to find the pathway of least resistance, right? It's always going to find its own way. Well, guess what happens if nothing changes in the ditch, but a bunch of water just gets dumped down over and over and over again? What's going to happen is erosion, right? It's going to erode, and eventually the pathway of least resistance is going to get wider and wider, and more water will flow that way, which means less water will go the other ways. Addictions work that way in the brain. You literally change your brain when you are addicted, because the dopamine, which is your reward chemical, is trained to be released for certain things. And if you trained your brain to release dopamine for addictions, then that's what your brain is going to reward. And other things won't reward the same way, right? Some people reward they set their brain up and they have a high dosage of dopamine crash when they exercise. Those are some weird people to me, but they're typically skinnier people than me too, right? But that's because they've been conditioned. They've conditioned their body, they've conditioned their brain to reward such behavior. Do you know you can be addicted to fast food? Not just I like fast food. Your brain could literally change when it comes to fast food addiction. Because you set it up, the dopamine channels are rewarding that high-fat content into your body and the taste content. So your brain, it's almost like you're driving and all of a sudden you don't know how you ended up over here in the fast food. Right? I'm driving, there it is again, now I'm at Whataburger. There it is again, I'm at Wendy's or McDonald's or whatever. And you look at that and you're like, I don't know why when I drive past these places, I always feel a pull and a tug. And if you've ever been addicted to fast food, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You can be addicted to fast food. You know you can be addicted to shopping. Some of you men want to amen that one, but you're not brave enough. Don't worry, it's not just the ladies now. Not just like you can be addicted to shopping. Because shopping can make us feel good, right? Yeah, it can. Now, look, you look at that and go, well, it's just these ladies who have too many shoes, or maybe they have too many dresses or whatever. But no, It's not. It's not. Sometimes guys feel like they need another gun. Or maybe guys need another component to their automobile. Or maybe guys need fill in the blank. They've got a hobby, right, that they do. The boys and I try to be involved in things. So I was a big baseball card collector growing up. We've started putting that in. So when we travel, we try to hit up a baseball card shop somewhere, right? Now, I don't think we're addicted because that's a pretty expensive addiction. And right now, Dad's the only one putting that up for the most part. These guys contribute a little bit, right? But the idea behind that is this. You can be addicted to shopping because if you've trained your brain to release the dopamine, it makes you feel good. But I want you to think about video games. Because oftentimes we look at video games and we say, is it really a big deal? I mean, they're just playing. Everybody needs some downtime, and they do. And so if you're wondering right out of the gate, I'm not anti-video games. I play video games, okay? I play it with my boys. I'm a dad who believes they should engage me on my interest and on the things that I tell them to engage me with, but I need to engage them on their interest as well. And so a lot of that is not because I'm a man in my mid to late 40s who believes I need to be on video games all the time. It's a purpose. But if you are, don't take that as me saying it's a bad thing. Everybody does need to unwind, okay? And maybe for you that's gardening, maybe for you it's video games. I don't know. But what I do know is this. It's very addictive. And here's why it's addictive. I didn't understand this until I interviewed a guy on my podcast who was a trauma therapist. And he said that video content, it triggers your brain different than image content. Now, he was talking about it from pornography, right? And so what he was saying is the way that pornography is put out to the consumer today is so much more highly addictive than it used to be when a person had to go into a convenience store and buy a magazine from behind the counter and they put it into a brown paper bag and send it out. When you see the image as a video and you experience it as a video, your brain triggers differently than if it was a still image. He says it's much more addictive and much more addictive to see a video. Now that's why the video games have a high addiction component to them. As a matter of fact, when you start looking at the statistics of this, I thought it was quite interesting. Not only do 90% of children and teenagers in the United States now play video games and spend a substantial amount playing video games, Verizon, a U.S.-based telecommunications provider, reported there was a 75% increase in online gaming during COVID-19. Internet gaming disorder, which is defined as playing an immersive game to an unhealthy degree, its internet gaming disorder was actually put on the World Health Organization's list of classification of diseases. I thought that was quite interesting. And they would go on to say that, if you have gaming disorder, if it gets in the way of other activities, gaming continues despite negative consequences and impairment in personal, family, and social, educational, occupational, or other important areas of life. How do you know, though, if you're addicted, right? That's it. That's what you want to know. How do we know if we have anxiety? Well, how do we know if we're addicted? Well, what they'll go on to say is this. Number one, do you have a preoccupation with gaming? Is it what you think about when you're not playing? Is it your go-to when you don't have anything else to do? Withdrawal symptoms when gaming is taking away or not possible. What are withdrawal symptoms? Do you feel a sense of sadness, anxiety, and irritability? What about your tolerance? Not tolerance like, hey, you have an opinion, I have an opinion, but like your tolerance of, I played 30 minutes a day 3 years ago, but that's not enough now to get my fix. Now I'm playing 3 hours and 30 minutes to get my fix. An inability to reduce playing. In other words, I try to cut back, but it seems like that's all I think about. I try to cut back, but I still gravitate back towards the same habits. So you have an unsuccessful attempt to quit. Giving up other activities, loss of interest in previously enjoyed activities. Continuing to game despite problems. My grades are going down. My problem with my parents are happening. Problems with other friends. Or perhaps in other areas of life. Deceiving family members or others about the amount of time I spend on gaming. How much time did you play the game for today, son? Oh, I played maybe an hour, when reality is you were an hour here, 30 minutes later you were another hour, 30 minutes later you were another hour, 30 minutes later you were another hour. But why did you say only an hour? Because you wanted to mislead. Why did you want to mislead? Because you know that you're not supposed to be playing it that much. The use of gaming to relieve negative moods. In other words, I'm depressed. What do? Go play the game. I'm angry. What do? Go play the game. I have a sense of hopelessness. What do? I go play the game. Risk having jeopardized or lost a job or relationship due to gaming. All of those fall under gaming disorders. And so if you look at that, you're like, well, how do I know if my teen is addicted? Well, number one, I would offer to you, how much time do they spend? That's not always indicative, but it is pretty strong indicator. Now, whereas yesterday, the American Academy of Pediatrics would tell us how much screen time they believe that children should have, they were not approaching that from a Christian standpoint. They were approaching that from an emotional, mental, medical standpoint. And I think it's interesting that they would put limits. Why would medical doctors put limits, but parents not? Baffles my mind. Why would Christian parents who want their children to be heaven-bound and heaven-focused not place limits? Now look, I can't answer that. That's individual to each and every one of the families that have to deal with that. But it at least deserves an answer. It at least deserves a contemplation. Because what they're seeing is that addictions can rule people's lives. I'm not happy in church service. Why are you not happy in church service? Well, it's 2 hours and it's boring. Why is it boring? Well, number one, I don't have the video game in front of me. Nobody says that. And what we love to say is, well, that preacher didn't keep my attention. I would offer something to you. If God only used dynamic speakers, there would be a lot of men who would never preach again in their lives. Because God didn't create us all to be the same. You see that? My style is much different than other speakers. And that doesn't mean that they're any less effective in the hands of God. But I would offer this to you. Where in the Bible did it ever say the preacher was supposed to keep your interest? Was that always on the preacher? Or was that on the message of the preacher? Was it the message of the gospel that was supposed to keep your interest? Now look, I believe that we should not set out to bore people. Okay, I do believe that. I believe we should do our homework. We should, fine-tune our craft, right? We're public speakers. We ought to learn different techniques, ways to engage the audience. You probably already have learned some of mine. I tend to rely on humor some, right? And I'll explain that to people. If I get a read on the room as I'm speaking and I think, okay, maybe there's starting to be a little disconnect because the statistics are a little heavy, well, then you're going to see me turn maybe a little bit to humor, right? And that's a technique. Techniques also are me walking up the aisle. You know why? Because when I walk up the aisle, you get a little uncomfortable because I'm no longer so far away from you, right? I believe we should fine-tune our craft, but I also want you to say this. Here's why I even bring this up. Because teenagers oftentimes and young kids and parents may hear this, I get bored. I don't want to go. And that's an awesome opportunity for moms and dads, grandmas and grandpas to get a gauge on the why. Why is it my child is struggling sitting for 45 minutes listening, or an hour in a worship service, 30 minutes listening to the gospel being preached, but have no problem sitting 3.5, 4 hours in front of a video game system? And that's got to be addressed. Not in a sense of let me make my child feel bad, but if I condition my child's brain to constantly having to be stimulated and changing all the time, then I'm actually doing damage for them when they get out of my home and they no longer attend worship service because I told them to. Now they have to choose, and all they say is, it's so boring. I'm disinterested. You're like, well, if those church brethren would only do a better job. No, you can't pass the buck. What did you do in your home to condition your children and grandchildren to be God worshipers? Now you say, well, Joe, why is that a big deal? It's a big deal because video games seem to be a major contributing factor to addiction, and addiction deals with dopamine reward. And when a dopamine reward center is so grafted in the brain, other areas are not rewarded the same. That'll play into their future marriages too, just so you know. It will. If they are more happy playing the video game than they are spending time with their spouse, there's a problem. There's a bad problem. Last but not least, I want to deal with this one, online reputation. You know, a lot of colleges are actually starting to look, I say starting, not starting, but they look at an online reputation. You see there a billboard on the screen, And I want you to think about the online atmosphere like that billboard. You guys have billboards here. We drive by billboards all the time. You drive by billboards all the time. And that billboard is advertising something about a product, about a place. It's an invitation. Sometimes it wants to draw out a response from you, right? To purchase something, to scan a QR code, whatever it is. But the billboard is an advertisement about a product that is supposed to tell you something. I want you to think about your child's online reputation in this way. Because truth be known, colleges are looking at online reputation and online posting to find out whether or not they really want that child in their school. It's been said before in the statistic that I have written down, more than 80% of college recruiters use social media in the admissions process. Now, I can tell you as a college recruiter, social media is used when it comes to trying to connect with a student. And part of that is because, and you'll be able to relate to this, right? If you want that student to come to your school, you need to sell your school specifically to that student. It's selling anything, right? If I want to sell a car to you, I'm not going to sell a car to a young mom and dad who have 3 small children the same way I would sell a car to a grandma. I want to highlight why that car fits that family specifically. You see what I'm saying? You can tailor your sales pitch to the person. So if I get on social media and I see that he plays guitar, or I see that she is in drama of some sort, right? Then I'm going to utilize that in talking with that child. Now you say, well, that's manipulation. I say, welcome to sales. That's why you love used car salesmen, right? All of that, though, is relationship building. But on top of that, when it comes to the admissions process, sometimes students are not admitted to the school, perhaps because there is an inappropriate track record online. This kid's a partier. This kid's a troublemaker. This kid is involved in da-da-da-da-da. And then in the admissions process, you're going, okay, if this is a risk, how much do we want to risk? If you only have so many dollars to spend, you want to bring in kids maybe that will help your school increase in credibility, call up the other students. Or, and I'll offer this, or schools like Freed-Hardeman might say, you know what, we believe Freed would be the best place for that kid, because they're going to be in an environment that's going to teach them the Word of God and have spiritual mentors, and the student body population is going to affirm positivity and things along those lines, and could help that kid turn around. So all of that to simply say this: your child is advertising online, and you started that advertising process long before your child ever did. On top of colleges, employers are looking at online. I thought this was interesting. 70% of employers use social media to screen candidates before hiring them. They want to know, you say you're proficient at these various programs. I want to see if there's anything on your social media that tells me you're proficient. LinkedIn is a big one for that. Most of our kids aren't dabbling in LinkedIn until they get up to wanting a job, right? A career. 57% are less likely to interview a candidate that they cannot find online. Let me make sure you heard that one. If they can't find them online, 57% are less likely to interview them, which almost creates a necessary evil concept, doesn't it? That I almost need to teach my child how to do this, not just not to do this. And I would offer to you that's probably a better approach, because here's why. I don't believe that the social media world serves no purpose. I believe it serves a purpose. I think that purpose has to be crafted and be intentional. But I think if they don't learn it from us as parents and grandparents how to navigate that, who will they learn it from when they leave your house? Somebody's going to fill the gap, because chances are as your child gets into college and becomes a young adult and starts a career, they're going to now get into this world. And if you didn't walk with them in an appropriate manner in the early days and establish some God-honoring principles, are they going to try to play catch-up, or will they just not have those God-honoring principles established in their life? I thought that was interesting. 57% are less likely to interview a candidate they cannot find online. 54% have decided not to hire a candidate based on the social media profile. Well, what are they looking for? 61% want to see if what you put on your job application matches what they see. 37% want to know what other people are posting about the candidate. Not just what they said about themselves, but how are other people talking about them. And 24% are looking for any reason not to hire you. 1 out of every 4 employers are just saying, give me a reason not to hire you. And I think, wow, that's very telling about the digital billboard concept. So what do we do then? Well, here's what I want to encourage you to do. There's 3 words, and you'll notice, like every good preacher, they all start with the same letter. Here you go, right? You need to help them create a digital billboard that reveals the mission that you instilled within them as they were being raised in your home. And they are being raised in your home. Remember last night what you went through? What's the number one goal, right? If that's your number one goal, then you want buy-in from your kids. And if you want buy-in from your kids, then you're going to have to parent them in that manner and demonstrate that before them. But now help them make sure that their online digital reputation affirms that number one goal. So what the studies will say is that you need to be aware, that you need to help them be aware of their conduct. Be mindful of how they interact online. Remember that there is a person, a real person on the other side of that screen. Now, that is hard because the prefrontal cortex not developing until 25, the inhibitory factors that go in with that. What the studies are showing is that it's easy for especially teens, but I've even seen adults do it, and I just wonder, is your brain not all there, right? It's almost like they don't mind posting things online and they forget that they represent Jesus still. I know we all have political affiliations and beliefs, and we all have jobs, and we believe these jobs should maybe rule the day, and we all have teams that we root for, but at the end of the day, don't ever forget that there's a real person on the other end that's reading your comment, and they will draw conclusions about you and about your convictions. So if you say that I'm a God follower, I just want to be a disciple of Jesus Christ and introduce other people to Him, but all I'm doing is bashing other people online who disagree with me politically, there are going to be some people who look at that and go, why would I ever want to have anything to do with your God? Because that's the way that you believe your God has demonstrated you should behave. Can we have convictions? Can we have logical discussions? Can we have disagreements? Yes. And we will. But even in those moments, we need to remember we reflect Jesus. And our kids need to see that in our post, and they need to be talked about in our home. Number 2, content. Think about what you share. Ask yourself, will it embarrass or humiliate me or someone else? You'll notice that there's this others-focused concept even in this area. And I believe that's a biblical approach. The Apostle Paul, writing to the church at Philippi, he made it very clear, an others above self approach to life. It's better for me to die, right? But to live is for your gain, others above self. Jesus emptied Himself, taking the form of a bondservant, Philippians chapter 2, verses 5 and following, others above self. Chapter 2, he would say, do not do anything out of selfish desires, others above self. Why is others above self such a big deal? Because that's following in the footsteps of Jesus. That's what we are called to do. You say, well, that's not fair. Christianity was never about fair. I mean, think about it. Do you want fair or do you want grace? Because you can't get both. So you have to be gracious because it's not going to be fair. Number 3, caring. Be thoughtful, kind, and caring. Remember to post with empathy for others. I will tell you this, sometimes social media posts say a lot about, not sometimes, they always say a lot about us, and sometimes it's not good. I believe that when you find yourself in that dilemma, that those who want to be pleasing to God will correct that. But I also believe this, your children need to know how to do these things as they move forward, because people will draw conclusions about them, sometimes without ever meeting them. Have you ever done that? Just on social media alone, maybe you haven't spent much time around that person. Maybe you've only casually seen them, but you go on social media and it's like this is what you're seeing. For whatever reason, the algorithm is allowing that person's content to get to your screen more than others, right? And so the more you click on it, the more the algorithm goes, aha, they want to see it, right? And so what happens is you see that person that you only know online, but you keep reading about them, and you keep reading about them, you keep reading their posts and reading their posts. You may never have met them or only met them once or twice, but you're already drawing conclusions about them. Other people do the same thing about our kids. If our kids have social media sites, they're drawing conclusions. Their professors are going to draw conclusions about them. Their bosses or potential bosses will draw conclusions about them. Church members will draw conclusions about them. And unfortunately, I've actually been a part of some things where church members draw conclusions about teenagers and they become concerned about the moral stance of those teenagers. So they either try to go to the parents, which causes a problem, or they go to elders, which causes another problem. And before too long, you've got 2 families or maybe 3 or 4 families within a congregation because of something that was posted online. Now all of a sudden they're struggling in their relationship. And it's like, well, the online stuff shouldn't separate us. I know it shouldn't, but it does. And that's why we've got to be concerned with reputation as well. Anxiety, addiction, reputation. Quite honestly, there's so much more that could be said, that is said in the book, but also other areas that we could dive into. Just time restricts it. Just be aware that digital technology is not a neutral. It does have an impact. The only question is, are you allowing it to impact you in ways that are negative, or is the impact that you're having through technology positive? I don't believe there's ever a neutral. The question is, how are we navigating that impact, and how are we equipping our children to navigate that impact? Let's end with a word of prayer, and that's all I have for today. So you guys are going to have a wonderful day. I pray in good conversations. Let's go to our Father. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we do love you, and we're grateful that you love us. Thank you for smiling down upon us. Thank you for giving us this morning, for the fellowship that exists, the opportunity to enjoy good donuts, good food, good coffee, but more important, just good conversation. And Lord, we're grateful that you have allowed a beautiful day for such. Thank you for those who are helping take care of the children outside. Lord, we know those adults, they have put a lot of time and energy into this day so that moms and dads and grandmas and grandpas can sit here and ingest this and contemplate the material. And so, Lord, we ask your blessing to be upon them. Thank you for the children. Thank you for those young people who are being raised in homes, Lord, that desperately desire your glory, and they want to direct these kids in that pathway. And so, Lord, I pray you be with the parents and grandparents, those who love them here, that you would give them a measure of wisdom, a measure of discernment as they raise these kids to seek you, not only now, but in the long game when they leave their parents' homes. Lord, thank you for those who are here who have no children, but who just desire to be a blessing, desire to gain knowledge, desire to fellowship. And Lord, I pray your blessing be upon them as well. Thank you. Thank you for your Son most of all. And Lord, as we contemplate our own walk with you, our desire would be, Lord, that you'll be patient with us, you'll be long-suffering with us, and that you will be quick to continue to forgive when we come home. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you so much. You are dismissed. Feel free to fellowship. I don't know if there's more donuts, but I have a feeling it's lunchtime, but that may not stop you.